Chapter 2. Rakesh decided not to stay till 5 p.m. The child's guy had spooked him a little, and he was worrying about his oldest friend. If the situation topside even slightly reflected the shenanigans of the underground, he felt that he needed to be close by at the very least. That's not to say that she was weak, but she was old, and her pride would probably goad her into biting off more than she could chew. He grinned as he remembered the last pair of thieves had attempted to rob her. Her knife handling and skillet skills were brutal as hell. Had she been 40 years younger or so, she would have definitely gotten into trouble, but she played up the frailty in court, and Rakesh was certain the judge had eaten at her restaurant several times. It's as she said, it's not always what you know, it's sometimes who you know. He'd been quite annoyed at that revelation. It's not like he'd wanted her to do time, it's just that she shouldn't have needed friends in the right place for justice. She pointed out that without money and friends, the trial might have gone differently. At that time in their friendship, he'd happily dismissed her rants as paranoid conspiracy theory, but sadly, he'd come to learn later the bitter truth. The world seemed a little colder with that little extra layer peeled away. Regardless, no amount of friends could save from a knife or gun at the wrong time. The dock worker jacket he wore had been a gift from her. The gloves he had pinched from the kiosk, as well as a whole host of items taken as severance. His duct-taped shoes were comical yet functional, and the makeshift patch did seal his trousers, but left a hilarious highlight right above the cheeks. Locking up the store had been a bit of a ball ache. 2 sets of gloves had made handling the store keys awkward. Recent developments had meant that wearing both were essential, and until certain developments had come under control, or at least some kind of medical assessment had been performed. Feeling a little uncomfortable, he tucked his hands deep into his side pockets. The shriek he had released earlier hadn't helped matters either. It didn't quite sound quite like his voice. It was strange. Everything felt different. Off, somehow. The underground felt ridiculously bright, despite all the dodgy electrics. The general funk seemed super pungent, and it actually seemed to have layers and accents. For instance, the tank man had run deeper into the underground, and there were faint hints of his aftershave, sweat, and a slight hint of urine. Charles had found an exit. The outside air had mingled with his cigarettes, and the draft had drawn a shortcut for Rakesh to follow. It was odd. There was a strange tinge of stress that hadn't been with him when they spoke in the kiosk. Rakesh had been unconsciously following Charles's trail, but a heavy sensation caused him to stumble onto a different path. What the hell was happening to him? He wasn't ill. In fact, he felt vibrant, like his entire life had just been off the main signal, and something had tweaked the dial so it was all crystal clear. Perhaps it was the disparity between the 2 states? Rakesh was slight, but he was extremely fit. After some severe trauma years ago, he'd taken various martial arts and weight trained a lot. He'd had counselling through one of his sifus, and while not 100% mentally, his body had healed. And he felt he was certainly more than he was. It's just, now, he felt leagues beyond that. Fresh air. Sometimes, just the simple act of being able to breathe deeply is enough to center yourself. Following the air currents, the nearest exit was found, and bounding up the stairs, 5 at a time, Rakesh noted that he wasn't even slightly tired. The sunlight was dazzling, and it ricocheted and sparkled off the glass, throwing ribbons of light everywhere. For a small moment, everything seemed normal. Letitia's restaurant was only 45 minutes from here on foot, and Rakesh felt that he'd probably get there in 15. Rolling his neck, he wondered how she was doing. That old black broad was pretty tough, so he was probably worrying needlessly. Perhaps, he mused, but better to laugh at himself later than take the chance. He took in his surroundings. The streets were deserted. Buses, lorries, and cars littered the streets. Taking a deep breath, he noted that he couldn't smell blood, so the disappearances possibly weren't as violent as Charles and he had first opined. It was disturbing, though. As he began to jog, he saw a few signs of looting here and there, but whatever had happened, even the ne'er-do-wells had started to scamper. He skipped over a several grand flat screen just abandoned on the pavement. Passing a jeweler's, he slowed to see a tray of finery spilled all over the floor and a sack of swag just lying there. He didn't even stop. He could tell something nasty was waiting inside, so he accelerated away. He felt the disappointment rumble through the pavement, and he poured on even more speed. It felt so good. The scenery began to slightly blur and tear past him as he ran through the streets. His coat began to build behind him and made an audible noise. His shoes had long since disintegrated, and the pieces had scattered, sprinkled, and spiraled into his slipstream. A 16-wheeler had been parked across both lanes, and some delivery crates blocked off the pavement. Rakesh didn't even stop. He ran up and over alongside the adjacent building wall, just long enough to clear the truck, and continued pounding down the street. He jumped over a car, then tried for a couple. He managed about 4 in a line till he slightly clipped and tumbled. Fuck! Certainly, he was about to snap his neck. He cursed his foolishness and tried to right himself. He completed a somersault and landed perfectly on his feet. Bouncing, he slowed to a stop and walked to the curb. Taking a seat, he took off his gloves, threw them away, and looked at his hands and feet. He had to admit he didn't often scream, but the retractable claws under his nails were initially terrifying. He assumed that he'd probably had matching toes as well, but the pad-style shaping that now resembled his soles were kind of cool. They were squidgy to the touch, but obviously were pretty durable. Looking around frantically, he started laughing. There had been this low purring sound, and it dawned on him that he was the source. There wasn't any time to appreciate the new sensation. The great ape that landed right in front of him did not look friendly. To call it merely a great ape is a mockery of the language we wield. To give it its true honorifics, however, would leave those of weak dispositions numb and alone in their broken psyches. Perhaps it was a story tall, maybe even 1.5. It wasn't black, it was the darkness that our ancestors were wary of. It was the absence of all hope. It wasn't dangerous. It was the unmarked graves of the war dead. It was the conclusion. Had Rakesh been caught in the tender mercies of the hate-filled gammons again, they simply wouldn't register. Tiny red fires danced across its fur. They whispered between the black nails that could be called its hair. It looked right through him and decided that his continued existence displeased it. Rakesh had cleared 4 junctions before he heard the roar. The bastard enjoyed hunting. A smirk grew in his face. There was no way it would fit him there. Diving into a Sainsbury's local, he grabbed a small bottle of water and took a couple of sips, trying to figure out if he could get anything to help. Moments later, it came shoulder barging in, bursting through the shop front and taking a dent of the ceiling with it. Rakesh had already left the building. A little miffed, he realized he'd need something a little harder to slow the beast. He almost tripped, knowing Letitia would cock her head and laugh loudly at the phrasing for that one. Rakesh decided to see how it handled trees, so he cut across a dense green space, the kind often littered by students and yuppies. It barreled through them, throwing decades-old trees through the air like confetti. The next obstacle was lampposts. They couldn't be thrown as easily, and this seemed to frustrate the beast to the point where it took time to smash one to pieces in an impressive display of fury. Realizing that his prey was getting away, it decided to start leaping. Its airtime was ridiculous, and despite the impending doom, Rakesh slowed down a little to actually take in its flight path. Its eyes were ablaze now, and spittle was flung back either side of its maw. "Why couldn't you just eat the fruit in the store?" shouted Rakesh. As it landed, it grabbed several cars and bowled them down the road. "Human meat tastes so much better." To be honest, Rakesh expected an answer. He knew this creature could at the very least reason. Having confirmation that this wasn't some dumb territorial beast, he let out a sigh and turned to face it. Leaping from car to car, he closed the distance to the ape, then showed the beast the results of his shop forage. A scored bottle of Tabasco, each for both eyes, and some soca sauce for the nostrils. He did get a backhand for his trouble, and a dislocated arm. But he landed on his feet and headed for the bridge. The beast bellowed in a cacophony of rage and bluster. It put all its speed into giving chase to its prey. It gave no thought to the darkened portal that it disappeared into, so was confused at the crunching sensation its skull felt when it ran into the reinforced low bridge. Rakesh heard the noise and tore a section of fence out of the moorings. It made a spear of sorts. Well, if a mace and a spear had a love child, and it grew up with the wrong crowd and started hanging with Cenobite sex toys, He turned to find the beast spinning and screaming, till it tripped and fell on the ground. It was fitting and probably would die soon. Rakesh touched his damaged arm and realized that it was already healing. Looking skyward for guidance, he realized that the beast might be able to heal too. It had blatantly tried to kill him. Its thrashings had slowed down. His arm had its full range of motion back. Its breathing was laboured and uneven. It's not enough to leave it to maybe die, his conscience prompted. The spear felt heavier than it did moments earlier. He attempted to grip it tighter, but he didn't really want to.
There are 30 great beasts.
Rakesh was stunned by how quiet such a loud voice could be.
Filled with madness and fury, we will destroy all, unless you, our previous masters, bend our heads and force our necks exposed.
The great beast coughed blood. It sensed Rakesh's reluctance. The laughter was cruel and mocking.
Not only must you kill me, you must devour my heart.
What? Rakesh couldn't help but respond.
Leave my carcass, and anything that eats it will gain my strength.
What if I destroy it? I'm still not sure I'm going to kill you.
Kill me? I'm dying, child. I was dying before I was blessed in this manner. I've seen a beast's heart destroyed. The forest was reduced to sand and ash.
Rakesh mulled over destroying it at a distance.
The beast was reborn moments later.
He discarded that idea. The spear was much lighter. Their eyes met.
The other beasts will know you. Lesser beasts will not challenge you. My strength will be yours, and I will know peace.
What is your strength exactly?
I'm not the strongest beast, nor will you gain my size. You will find leaving the ground easier, and your blows will carry more weight.
Rakesh nodded and lifted the spear.
When you meet your queen, I hope you will be ready.
Blood was smeared across his maw, and a lot had gotten into his hair. Eating it hadn't been as difficult as he'd imagined it would be, despite its ridiculous size. The meat elsewhere had dissipated the moment the final bite had been consumed, so Rakesh took its pelt and bones and stashed them in a nearby skip. They felt light but were strong enough to resist his blows. He made a point of remembering the area so he could come back for them, as they would probably make good weapons. Charles was right. This was massive. Not a single person within miles of the station. Monsters of this size and no official response. No cops, no soldiers, and no scientists. He felt hungry. Despite eating several meals worth of meat, he was starving. His body felt denser and ever so slightly thicker. His hair had grown some, and he was rocking a full beard despite being clean-shaven that morning. Looking at a shop front, he realized he was a little taller too. Maybe 2, perhaps 3 inches. With a grin, he leapt a few stories and bounced off a couple of buildings, making his way towards Letitia's restaurant.